your watercolor pencils always look scratchy or like plain colored pencil with a bit of water, I'm going to show you 7 hacks that make them look like real watercolor. Smooth backgrounds, soft blends, and clean details, while still keeping all the control we love about pencils. The perfect bridge between drawing and painting. Hi, I'm Françoise. Welcome back to my channel, your space for watercolor and watercolor pencil art. I'll use this reference and you'll see that the first 4 hacks are all about stopping watercolor pencils from looking scratchy and cheap. And then the last 3 hacks are where we add the magic and really push the watercolor look. So let's jump in. Hack number 1 is the dust hack, and this is how you get smooth backgrounds without hours of coloring or annoying streaks. The usual way is to color, add water, and as you've noticed, end up with streaks. That will be fine and fixable for tiny areas, I'll show you later. But for backgrounds, it just looks like hard work, not watercolor. That's why I do it completely differently. I use sanding paper to shave off pencil dust straight onto the paper. I start with my lightest colors, yellow and red, let the pigment fall where I want it, and then push it around with a paper towel so it turns into a soft, even layer. Because I decided to add blue in this painting and it's a strong color, I repeat that step with indigo. So yellow, red, and indigo are the colors that I've picked for the bird. So when I include them to the background, everything feels connected. And mixed together, they naturally turn into soft greens and purples, which is perfect for a landscape setting. I want something dark, so when my main colors are in place, I add water-soluble graphite, or you can use a very dark gray, brown, or black. And I keep that mostly in the corners to push the shadows so the bird will stand out later. Then comes the satisfying part about this hack. I like to spray water with a bottle for speed, then I use a flat brush to smooth things out and guide the paint. I'm not chasing perfection here because I'm looking for a loose and soft background, just like traditional watercolors. And to add even more mood, I splatter clean water on that background and let blooms appear. And because pencils dry a bit faster than traditional watercolors, I find that this technique is particularly effective, as you can see here. The blooms are looking beautiful and the background magical and smooth, all without a bunch of time spent coloring. Hack number 2 is the color hack, because with watercolor pencils, what you color and how you do it can either turn into a wet colored pencil drawing or a watercolor painting. Remember that coloring works better in smaller areas, like that cardinal bird, and it's convenient for those of us who enjoy a bit of control, something we didn't need in the background. The mistake a lot of beginners make is pressing hard, but also going back and forth, because that causes bold pencil lines and heavy edges, even with the best watercolor pencils. And even after you add water, those lines tend to show through and the painting looks harsh and overworked. Instead, I use light pressure and overlapping oval motions. Again, I start with my lightest colors. In this case, I add more of the yellow in the lightest areas of the bird and more of my red where red looks bolder. Try and think in broad zones when you color and keep a light hand to begin. If there are shapes that need a clearer separation because maybe you just don't want to lose your sketch, just add a bit more pressure there. Watercolor pencils make that very easy. And if there are areas that you think should stay white or very light, this would be the moment to leave them alone. I don't have many here in that bird, only to the right side. So for coloring to turn into beautiful watercolor, small areas and light pressure are great. Just take your time with it. And that's what I love about watercolor pencils. There is no need to paint everything in a hurry. There's so much more control and time to think. Hack number 3 is all about paper because what you use is going to decide how scratchy or smooth your painting is going to be after wetting the pigment. On the rough watercolor paper here on the left, you get these deep hills and valleys, while the one I'm using on the right has texture but still is smooth enough to grab onto pencil pigment and still make coloring easy with the previous hack. On rough textures, even with a lot of care, it's harder to color smoothly. When I switch to smoother watercolor paper like cold press or hot press, the pencil glides more evenly. There are a few white specks, and when I add water, it melts much more like real watercolor. For the bird painting, I'm using Arche cold press, but you don't need that. Any non-rough watercolor paper or even thick drawing paper can work, because watercolor pencils need very little water to activate, and it's going to be a lot easier to get great results even if the paper is not top quality. Hack number 4 is the water hack, how you activate pigment, and this is the make it or break it moment for watercolor pencils. So here's the wrong way first. A big wet brush and activate across several colors at once and push everything around. You can see how muddy this yellow have become. I've done it that way when I discovered watercolor pencils and ended up with a muddy mix where you cannot tell what is what. Instead, you want to use a damp brush. It's why I dab mine on a paper towel. And always start in the light areas first. Activate one section at a time, then rinse and dab your brush, and repeat this cycle across what it is you're painting, especially when colors change. So you're not dragging dark or strong pigment into your light areas, or start mixing all the colors together, like what happened before in the demo. Some pencils are more dry and scratchy than others, so they take longer to smooth out or stay slightly grainy. A lot of the times, I like to use Faber-Castell Arbor Stir for my art because they're creamy and they dissolve easily with just a bit of back and forth. And it looks very close to just painting with traditional watercolors. Remember with this hack that the key is very little water on the brush, and again, take your time and enjoy activating each section. With these 4 hacks, dust, color, paper, and water, we've removed what makes watercolor pencils hard to use. And now they actually behave like real watercolor with more control and less stress. And I'm going to show you how to add the magic next. But if you want a full step-by-step path with complete projects, I also have a watercolor pencil mastery course linked in the description. It takes you from beginner to confident with no less than 26 complete projects and a clear structure. Alright, so let's get into the 3 last hacks now, the ones that make the cardinal look alive. And hack number 5 is how you get depth and extra smoothness through layers, because even with watercolor pencils that are maybe a lower quality and maybe a little bit drier, harder to dissolve, with layering, you'll find out you're able to get them to smooth out a lot better. And it's not just the smoothness, because after the first activation, the cardinal looks okay, but still a little bit flat. There is just one layer of color and it doesn't pop that much against the background. So I go back with dry pencil on dry paint. I start again with the light colors, yellow and red, to refine the big parts, and then I add indigo around the eye, the beak, and all those almost black areas in the feathers that I see in my reference. And here is a powerful tip that you want to use when you layer. I don't stop at dark over light. I also go light over dark to soften transitions and colors that otherwise might end up looking too dull or too dark. For example, I use yellow over red to keep the bright and light oranges there. Then red over blue to warm up a shadow and make sure that the blue doesn't come out too strong. Then I activate everything a second time with a small brush, a little water, and again light to dark, one section at a time. And now the bird looks more vibrant, realistic, and much closer to a watercolor painting and it's also smoother than the initial coloring, so you can see how important layering is. Hack number 6 is the glaze hack, and that's a super quick way to boost the vibrancy and still keep that very smooth watercolor look. To use it, I wet a clean brush and I touch the tip of my yellow pencil to get instant liquid color on the brush. I glaze that over the lightest parts of the bird and see how quick that is and what difference it makes. And I do the same with red. So anytime that you think your colors look dull or just not vibrant enough, remember the glaze hack. It's very quick and it behaves just like watercolor. Hack number 7 is the wet lead hack. My favorite way to add final accents that look just like watercolor, just more playful and very easy to create. You can use this hack in 2 ways. So the first way is to wet the paper a little and draw into the damp area so your lines stay crisp but melt just enough to turn into instant paint. Second way is to wet the pencil lead in a jar and draw on dry paper for rich marks that are between drawing and paint because small chunks of the lead end up setting on the paper. I think it's very nice to add a texture, as you can see here, in twigs and branches, and also for crisp highlights with a white pencil on key areas in the painting. These small accents are often the last touch that makes the piece feel really finished, and you can push that texture beyond normal watercolors a lot more, of course, since we're working with pencil. So you can see how this painting here is just the beginning with watercolor pencils. You can do so much more. I'd love to know which hack you are most excited to try next on your own art, so feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you want to go further in a structured way, don't forget to check out my watercolor pencil mastery course in the description, or you can just try the full real-time tutorial for this cardinal on my Patreon, and I'll leave a link for that too. So thank you so much for watching and see you next time.